is just crucial, and then some key essentials for parish renewal. And hands down, the single most important essential for parish renewal, I think, is exposition. So Eucharistic exposition I describe as the wrecking ball. It's what changes everything. We didn't do it here. We did it one day a week before I got here. We started having another Mass every day. So we could have 2 every day so that people could have more access to the Eucharist, especially went to work, but also so that we could put the Eucharist on the altar every single day. And Father and I know this, some of you have seen this book, Insinu Jesu, but we both kind of started devouring this a couple of years ago now, and it's a series of reflections that this Benedictine monk who lives in Ireland has put down on paper of things the Lord has said to him about praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament, especially as a priest praying for priests, but not only as a priest praying for priests. And nothing changes a life, I'm just convinced, like the Eucharist. And I've shared this before, but I'll share it again for those who haven't heard it, because it's what changed my life as a priest. I had no experience of this growing up. I was not in a devotional home as a child. My mom was evangelical, or was Methodist and kind of evangelical leading. My sisters were all evangelicals at the time. They married evangelical men. I didn't know any Catholic devotions. I certainly never saw Eucharistic exposition that I can think of in my life until I went to seminary. And that was awkward for me for a lot of different reasons. I wasn't sure what to do when the Eucharist was exposed. Anyway, when I was first ordained, had some really powerful experiences on retreat with people in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and then we started doing it at Divine Child on a Wednesday night. Some of you were at DC at the time, I know. And I will never forget the first night that we changed what we used to do. We used to just, we had an evening Mass, and we would pray with people after Mass, which would go on and on and on for hours. And then people would go home. And then 1 week, I felt like the Lord just said something to the effect of, John, that's not really what they need. They don't need you, they need me. So why don't you just let them get to me? And so we decided we'd expose the Eucharist. So Divine Child's Church, most of you have seen, it's typical kind of like 1,500 pews all facing the altar. It's not like ours in a fan. They're all just facing, and pretty good-sized sanctuary. And so explained to people what we were going to do that night, put 2 kneelers in front of the altar, invited people if they felt led to come on up to pray. Great, love to have you. Then we'll just spend some time here, and then we'll do benediction after a half hour or so. And so Mass ended, and I went to the tabernacle, turned my back, grabbed the Blessed Sacrament, put it in the monstrance, had my head down, put Jesus on the altar. I'm hearing lots of commotion, which I figured was people just leaving, putting coats on, like Father putting the mic on. I kneel down over here, and as I look here at the altar, here there's 50 or 60 people kneeling on the floor in front of the Eucharist. It was like this rush to come forward. And I remember just looking at this going, what in the world? And as I'm looking at the crowd in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and I'm looking at the Blessed Sacrament, I don't know what to call this, I'll call it a vision. So I just see Jesus standing on the altar, and he is like royal as all get out, and majestic as all get out. And he's standing there looking out at everybody. And then at a certain point, so he's looking out at the crowd and bills me, and he just turns to me, and he does this. And he said, John, don't you see how easy this is? You don't have to do anything. You just have to put me out, and I will work. And I'm flat out convinced in that. I'm convinced that's what changed this parish in the way that we've changed. And I'm convinced it will change your lives, those of you who haven't yet gotten into the habit of praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament. That's how everything changes. That's how you meet him in an absolutely unique way. So maybe the night of the 30th in the morning of the first will be a first time for some of us to get in front of the Blessed Sacrament. And maybe after that, it will be something that we not only make a point to do once a week, but maybe even we make a point to do it every single day. It's what Father does every day. It's what I do. It's what Father Dave does. I would have nothing to offer anybody if I didn't do that. And I don't know why it's any different for any of you, quite honestly. And maybe even more important for you, because my 12,000 kids know I can't be there for all of them. Your kids don't know that. Like, they expect you to be there all the time, or your spouse all the time for them. And they need you in a way that God's called you to that vocation. So for a lot of you guys, the first time I encountered you was at a men's conference, and the first men's conference was challenging you to pray an hour every day. And maybe that's a fitting way to close. If you're not in the habit of doing that yet, get in the habit of doing that. These are amazing times to be alive. You don't happen to be alive right now. Out of all the ages in the history of the world, God didn't want you to live in any of them except this one. And He chose that because He has an amazing mission for every single one of us. And I just want to encourage us not to dream small. What God's begun here is so much bigger than what any of us can imagine. What His desire is so much greater than what any of us dream about. God has huge plans. And if our plans don't make us nervous, He's probably offended as all get out. So dream big and think big and be generous and roll up our sleeves and let's go. But first, let's get on our knees and beg for His grace and for His strength and to know Him better. Because when we go out, as Father mentioned about the crisis in the church, I mean, we don't have anything to offer anybody except Him. We certainly aren't inviting Him to some really well put together organization. But we do have Him. And He alone is the answer of every human heart. So let's get to know Him better and make Him known. Okay? Thanks, guys.